At my sister's birthday party, she smirked, "I want my sister's husband and her house as my gift." My parents replied immediately, "No problem, anything for our precious daughter." My husband, sitting beside me, tried to calm me, "Don't worry, honey, it's just for one night." And the house. I stared in shock, but my name is Brenda, and this is the story of how my entire family betrayed me in the most unimaginable way possible, and how I made every single one of them pay for it. It feels strange to say that out loud, even now. You see, if you'd looked at my life just a few years ago, you would have thought I had it all. At 52, I was a successful marketing director at a Fortune 500 company right here in Denver. I didn't get there by accident. I worked my tail off, putting myself through college with scholarships and 2 part-time jobs, climbing the corporate ladder one rung at a time, and building a life I was genuinely proud of. That life included a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house in an upscale suburb, a home I purchased with my own money, from my own salary, long before I even met my husband, Keith. It was my sanctuary, the physical proof that all my hard work had paid off. Keith and I had been married for 6 years. He was a project supervisor at a construction company, a good-looking man with an easy smile. I thought we were happy. I thought we were a team. I was wrong. To understand what happened, you have to understand my family dynamic. I have a younger sister, Cheryl. She's 4 years younger than me, and for as long as I can remember, she has been my parents' golden child. While I was expected to be perfect, Cheryl was expected to be, well, just Cheryl. She drifted through life like a boat without a rudder, a perpetual victim who never held a steady job for more than 6 months. She had 2 kids from 2 different fathers, both of whom vanished the second the topic of child support came up. Despite her complete inability to function as an adult, she could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. My father, Harold, and my mother, Lorraine, spent my entire life making excuses for her. The pattern was set early. When I brought home straight A's, they'd nod and say, "That's what we expect from you, Brenda." When Cheryl barely passed with D's, they'd throw a celebration dinner. I remember one time, I won a statewide science fair in high school. My parents told me it was a nice achievement. A week later, Cheryl managed to get a C on a math test she'd been failing all year, and they took her out and bought her a new stereo system. When I worked 2 jobs to pay for my college tuition, they called me responsible. When Cheryl dropped out of community college after a single semester, they said she was finding herself and handed her the deposit for an apartment. For years, I had to watch them bail her out of financial trouble, paying off her credit card debts, covering her rent when she got evicted. It was a constant drain, but whenever I tried to gently suggest that maybe they weren't helping her by enabling her, my mother would get this cold look in her eyes and say, "She's just had a harder life than you, Brenda. You need to be more compassionate." I should have seen the warning signs. I should have known that their favoritism would eventually cross a line so insane that it would destroy everything. But you never really think your own family is capable of something like that, do you? You make excuses. You tell yourself it's just how they are. You try to keep the peace. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the horror show that was Cheryl's 30th birthday party. The party was on a Saturday evening. Keith and I arrived at my parents' house, and the moment we stepped inside, I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach. The living room was a sea of pink and gold balloons. There was even a professional photographer my parents had hired, capturing every moment of their precious daughter's milestone birthday. Cheryl was preening in the center of the room, wearing a new designer dress that probably cost more than my first car, courtesy of Mom and Dad, of course. Brenda, Keith, my mother, Lorraine, called out, rushing over to hug us. "I'm so glad you could make it. Cheryl's been so excited to see you both." I hugged her back, trying to force a smile. "Of course, Mom. We wouldn't miss it." But something felt off. It was more than the usual discomfort I felt at these family gatherings. It was the way Cheryl kept smirking at me from across the room, a sly, knowing look in her eyes. It was the way my father, Harold, kept pulling her aside, whispering to her throughout the evening. They were acting like two people sharing a secret that somehow involved me. The party was small, just immediate family and a handful of Cheryl's friends, the few who had stuck around despite her years of toxic behavior. We sat down for dinner. I tried to make small talk with Keith, but he seemed distracted, almost nervous. I'd ask him a question, and he'd give a one-word answer, his eyes darting towards Cheryl and my father. After dinner, we all watched as Cheryl opened an obscene pile of expensive presents, all from my parents. A new laptop, a designer handbag, a spa weekend getaway. With each gift, she'd let out a little squeal of delight while my parents beamed, soaking in her happiness. I felt Keith squeeze my hand under the table, and for a fleeting moment, I thought it was a gesture of solidarity. Now I realize it was probably the hand of a guilty man. I was actually starting to relax, thinking the worst was over, when my father stood up, tapping his wineglass for attention. "Everyone," he began, his voice filled with that familiar tone of adoration he reserved exclusively for Cheryl. "I'd like to make a toast to our beautiful daughter on her 30th birthday." He went on and on about how she had brought light into their lives, how she was their greatest joy. Cheryl just sat there, beaming, soaking up every single word. "Now," my father continued, a wide smile on his face. "As is tradition in our family, the birthday girl gets to make a special wish, and we do everything in our power to make it come true." "Cheryl, sweetheart," he said, turning to her. "What would you like for your 30th birthday?" "Anything your heart desires." This was it. This was the moment my life shattered into a million pieces. Cheryl stood up, slowly smoothing down the fabric of her expensive dress. I swear I saw her glance at me, just for a second, and in her eyes, there was a look of cold, calculating satisfaction. Then she turned to her parents with that sickeningly sweet smile she'd perfected over the years, the one she used when she wanted something she knew she didn't deserve. "Well," she said, drawing out the word. "There are a few things I'd really, really love to have." "Anything, princess," my mother said immediately, her voice dripping with affection. "You know we'd give you the world." Cheryl's smile widened, and a genuine chill ran down my spine. She paused for dramatic effect, making sure she had everyone's complete attention. And then, she dropped the bomb. "I want my sister's husband," she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Keith. "And her house." The words just hung there in the air. The chatter stopped. The photographer lowered his camera. It felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I was sure I had misheard. It had to be a joke, a sick, twisted joke. My sister had not just asked for my husband and my home as birthday presents. That doesn't happen in real life. But before I could even process the words, before I could laugh it off as a terrible joke, my parents responded without missing a beat. My father clapped his hands together and said, "No problem, sweetheart." My mother chimed in, nodding eagerly. "Anything for our precious daughter." I stared at them, my mouth hanging open. The room started to spin. What did you just say?" I finally managed to stammer out. My father turned to me, his expression suggesting that I was the one being unreasonable. "You heard Cheryl, Brenda. It's her birthday wish. Are you insane?" I stood up so fast my chair fell backward with a loud clatter on the hardwood floor. "She can't just ask for my husband and my house. That's not a wish, that's psychotic." "Now, Brenda," my mother said, using that condescending tone she always used when she was about to tell me I was being selfish. "Don't make a scene. Your sister needs support right now with the children, and you have so much. Surely, you can share." "Share? Share my husband? My home?" I turned to Keith, my heart pounding in my chest, desperate for him to stand up, to tell my family they'd all lost their minds, to defend me, to defend us. Instead, he put a hand on my arm and said the words that would haunt my nightmares forever. "Don't worry, honey," he said softly, avoiding my eyes. "It's just for one night. And the house." He trailed off, but the implication was terrifyingly clear. He was going along with it. My own husband was siding with them. I stared at Keith, my mind struggling to comprehend the betrayal. "What are you saying?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He finally looked at me, and there was no fight in his eyes, only a weak sort of resignation. "Look, Brenda, Cheryl's in a tough spot. Her landlord is evicting her next week, and the kids need stability. Your house is big enough for all of us, and maybe if I just help her out for one night." "Help her out for one night?" I repeated, my voice rising with hysteria. "Are you listening to yourself? What does that even mean?" But I never got an answer. Because that's when Cheryl decided to twist the knife deeper. She glided over to me, that smug, triumphant smirk plastered on her face, and delivered the final blow. "There's more, sis," she purred. "Now, your husband's income and your salary will go towards my kids. They deserve a good life. And let's be honest," she added, her eyes glinting with malice, "you two don't even have children. What do you need all that money for?" That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed anger, of being the responsible one, of swallowing their favoritism, all of it erupted. "Are you out of your goddamn mind?" I screamed, my voice raw. "You want my husband, my house, and my money? What's next, Cheryl? Do you want my kidneys, too? Maybe a lung?" "Brenda, calm down," my father said firmly, his face hardening. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" I shrieked, laughing a wild, unhinged laugh. "My sister just asked for my entire life as a birthday present, and you're worried about me making a scene?" That's when things got physical. As I tried to push past them, to get away from these monsters, my mother grabbed one of my arms while my father grabbed the other. They physically restrained me, their grips like iron. "Let go of me." I struggled, but they held tight. "Brenda, you need to control yourself," my mother hissed through gritted teeth, her face inches from mine. While they held me pinned, helpless and struggling, Cheryl calmly walked over to my purse, which was sitting on a side table. She reached inside and pulled out my wallet, my car keys, and my phone. She held them up like trophies. "Here," my mother said, her eyes still locked on me, her voice chillingly calm. "Do as you like, sweetheart." Cheryl actually laughed. A light, airy sound that made my blood run cold. "Thanks, Mom," she said, stuffing my belongings into her own purse. "This is the best birthday ever." I was still fighting, still trying to break free, when my mother did something I never, ever thought she was capable of. She raised her free hand and slapped me across the face. The crack echoed through the silent room. My ears rang, and I tasted the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. "You ungrateful brat," she snarled, her face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. "After everything we've done for you, you can't do this one thing for your sister? You're insane," I spat, blood trickling from my lip. "All of you are completely insane." That's when she started hitting me in earnest. Not slaps, but closed-fist punches. To my ribs, my stomach, my back. My father held me fast, making it impossible to defend myself. Keith. Keith just stood there. A statue. Watching. "Stop," I gasped, the air knocked out of my lungs. "Please, stop." But she didn't stop. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the pain, and my mother's voice, cold and distant, saying, "Maybe this will teach you some respect." I woke up to the steady, rhythmic beeping of a machine and the sterile smell of antiseptic. For a moment, I was disoriented. Then the pain hit me, a dull, throbbing ache in my head and sharp, stabbing pains in my side with every breath. I slowly opened my eyes and saw the stark white ceiling of a hospital room. A kind-faced nurse named Carol came in. "Well, hello there, sleepyhead," she said gently. "You gave us quite a scare. You're at Denver General Hospital." She told me I'd been there for 3 days. A neighbor, walking his dog late Saturday night, had found me unconscious in my parents' driveway and called 911. My official diagnosis was 2 broken ribs, a severe concussion, and bruises covering most of my torso. "Do you remember what happened, honey?" she asked, her voice full of concern. The memories came rushing back, a tidal wave of betrayal and violence. I told her everything. Every horrifying detail. The wish. My parents' reaction. Keith's betrayal. The assault. When I finished, Carol was just staring at me, her mouth slightly open. "And your husband, he just stood there?" she whispered. I nodded, wincing as the small movement sent a fresh wave of pain through my skull. "I am so sorry," she said, shaking her head. "I've been a nurse for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of family dysfunction, but this is something else entirely." After she left, I lay there, staring at that white ceiling, the beeping of the heart monitor a steady rhythm counting out the seconds of my new life. In one single evening, my entire world had been burned to the ground by the very people who were supposed to love me most. My parents had beaten me unconscious for refusing to give up my life for my sister. My husband had been willing to let them. My sister had stolen from me while I was being held down. But as I lay there, feeling the broken pieces of my body, something inside me began to shift. The shock, the hurt, the grief, they were still there, but they were being consumed by something else. Something cold, hard, and sharp. It was rage. A pure, calculated rage. They thought they could take everything from me. They thought I was the weak one, the one who would just lie down and accept their insanity. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had just started a war they were not prepared to win. When Officer Martinez, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, came to take my official statement, I didn't hold back. I told her the entire, unvarnished truth. "Ma'am," she said when I finished, her eyes wide. "I have to ask, are you absolutely sure you want to press charges? These are very serious allegations against your entire family." I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady and clear, without a single tremor. "Officer," I said, "I'm absolutely sure. I want them charged with assault, battery, theft, conspiracy, and anything else your legal department can think of." She nodded slowly, a look of respect in her eyes. "We'll need to take photos of your injuries and collect your hospital records as evidence." "Do it," I said. "Get everything." The war had begun. The first few weeks were a blur of legal activity. My parents, Harold and Lorraine, were arrested and charged with felony assault and battery. Cheryl was charged with theft. The wheels of justice had started to turn, but I knew that wasn't enough. I wasn't just going to let the system handle it. I was going to dismantle their lives, piece by piece, with the same methodical precision I used to plan a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. The first target was the traitor closest to home, my husband, Keith. When he was served with divorce papers, he actually had the audacity to seem shocked. He tried to call me, leaving rambling voicemails about how it was all a misunderstanding and how he was caught up in the moment. I didn't even listen to them all before deleting them. A man who watches his wife get beaten unconscious doesn't get the benefit of the doubt. Here's what my loving family didn't know about me: I'm successful not just because I'm good at my job, but because I am meticulous. Especially with finances. I called my boss, explained the situation, leaving out the goriest details, of course, and he was horrified. He immediately offered me extended leave and, more importantly, connected me with the company's best attorney, a shark named Daniel Kim who specialized in complex family law. In our first meeting, I laid out years of financial records I had kept. Every asset was traceable, every contribution documented. When Keith's lawyer floated the idea that he deserved half of everything, Daniel just laughed. Your client, Daniel told his attorney over the phone, his voice dripping with condescension, contributed approximately 30% to the household income during the marriage. My client, Brenda, purchased the house with her own money before they were even married. She funded the renovations, the furniture, hell, she even paid for his last 2 car payments. He's lucky if he walks away with his clothes and his golf clubs. Don't waste our time with this nonsense again. That was the end of that discussion. Keith wasn't getting a dime from my divorce settlement. But I wasn't done with him. See, Keith worked for a small, family-owned business, Morrison Construction. His boss, Frank Morrison, was an old-school guy who valued loyalty and family values above all else. So, I scheduled a meeting with him. I walked into his office with a folder containing copies of the police reports, the restraining order, and the hospital photos of my bruised face and broken ribs. "Mr. Morrison," I said calmly, placing the folder on his desk. "My name is Brenda, and I'm Keith's wife. I thought you should know what kind of man you have working for you." Frank, a burly man with kind eyes, read through everything twice. His face grew redder with each page. He looked up at me, his expression a mixture of shock and disgust. He really went along with this?" he asked, his voice low. "He stood there and watched my mother beat me unconscious," I confirmed. "He was ready to spend the night with my sister while I was supposed to give up my house and hand over my salary to support her kids." Frank was quiet for a long, heavy moment. Then he looked me in the eye and said, "Brenda, I want you to know that Morrison Construction doesn't employ men who abandon their wives. Keith will be looking for new employment as of this afternoon." That evening, my phone rang. It was Keith, his voice high with panic. "Brenda, please. You have to call Frank. Tell him it's a mistake. I need this job. I'll lose everything." I let him ramble for a moment before I cut him off, my voice as cold as ice. "You should have thought about that before you decided to pimp yourself out to my sister, Keith," I said. "Good luck on the job hunt." Then I hung up and blocked his number for good. 1 down. 3 to go. Getting Keith out of my life was just the appetizer. The main course was what I had planned for my parents and my darling sister, Cheryl. I knew that to truly dismantle their lives, I needed more than just the assault charges. I needed to attack them from every angle. So, I hired a private investigator, a former cop named James Cooper, and I gave him one simple instruction: dig. Dig into every corner of their lives, especially their finances. What he found was better, and uglier, than I could have ever hoped. James's first report landed in my inbox a week later. My parents, who had always put on a front of being comfortably well off, were in serious financial trouble. "They've taken out multiple loans against their house over the years," James reported. "Every time your sister got into a jam, they'd get another home equity loan to bail her out. Between that and a reverse mortgage, they owe almost as much as the house is worth." But here was the kicker. James uncovered something that turned this from a family drama into a criminal conspiracy. "Cheryl has been forging their signatures on loan applications," he told me over the phone. "I found at least 4 instances where she took out high-interest personal loans using their information without their knowledge. Technically, Brenda, that's identity theft and bank fraud." Perfect. I immediately forwarded this information to the district attorney's office. The prosecutor was very interested in adding a few more felony charges to Cheryl's growing list. But James wasn't finished. His investigation into Cheryl painted a picture of a true career criminal. She wasn't broke because she was unlucky, she was broke because she had a massive, secret gambling addiction. "She's been going to the casino in Black Hawk 3, sometimes 4 times a week for the past 2 years, James explained, sending me a file full of photos, ATM withdrawal records, and credit card statements. "She's blown through at least $60,000 that your parents gave her for rent and groceries for the kids." This information was gold. I made sure my parents' attorney received an anonymous copy of the evidence. Suddenly, their precious daughter didn't look quite so sympathetic when they realized she'd been stealing from them for years to fund her gambling habit. Their united front was beginning to crack. But the PI uncovered even more. Cheryl wasn't just a gambler, she was a predator. He found multiple fake social media profiles where she pretended to be a cancer patient, complete with heartbreaking stories and photos stolen from the internet, asking for donations. He found fake GoFundMe campaigns, claiming her children needed urgent medical treatments they didn't actually need. He even found evidence she'd been catfishing lonely older men online, convincing them to send her money for various made-up emergencies. My sister wasn't just a spoiled brat, she was a stone-cold con artist. Each new piece of information was another nail in her coffin. The DA's office expanded their case significantly, adding charges of wire fraud and mail fraud. This was bigger than a family dispute now, this was a federal case. And on top of all that, I filed my civil lawsuit. My lawyer, Daniel, crafted a beautiful complaint seeking damages for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conversion of property. We sued my parents for $2 million and Cheryl for $1 million. As Daniel explained, they don't have that kind of money. But when we win, we can garnish their wages, seize their assets, and put liens on any property they own. Your sister will be paying you for the rest of her life. Their betrayal was about to cost them everything they had. And I was just getting started. The legal and financial attacks were crippling my family, but I wanted more than their money. I wanted to strip away the one thing they valued most, their reputation. My parents, Harold and Lorraine, had spent their entire lives cultivating an image of being respectable, church-going, community-minded people. I was about to burn that image to the ground. My plan was simple: tell the truth, everywhere, to everyone. I compiled a comprehensive dossier, a neat, organized folder containing the police reports, the hospital photos of my injuries, evidence of Cheryl's gambling and fraud, and the details of the criminal charges against all three of them. Then, I systematically delivered it to every pillar of their social world. I started with our extended family. I sent copies to every aunt, uncle, and cousin. The fallout was swift and brutal. My father's brother, my Uncle Tom, called him immediately. My father later tried to call me to complain, and I could hear Uncle Tom screaming at him through the phone, "Harold, what the hell is wrong with you? You beat your own daughter unconscious? For what? So that little grifter Cheryl could steal her house?" My mother's sister, Aunt Karen, who had always been closer to me, was equally disgusted. She cut my parents off completely. One by one, every family relationship they had crumbled. Next, I went after their professional lives. My father was a manager at a mid-sized accounting firm. When his criminal charges became public record, his boss was already uneasy. But when I made sure his employer was aware of the $2 million civil lawsuit, they saw him as a massive liability. 2 weeks later, my father's position was downsized. He was unemployed. My mother worked part-time as a secretary at a law firm. As you can imagine, lawyers don't appreciate having an employee who assaults their own children and gets sued for millions. She was fired the day after her arrest made the local news. Then, I went for their community. I printed out simplified, one-page summaries of what they had done, complete with a picture of my bruised face, and left them in mailboxes all up and down their street. Within a week, they couldn't walk to their car without getting dirty looks. The whispers followed them at the grocery store, the bank, their favorite restaurant. Small towns have a way of making life very uncomfortable for people who step out of line. Their church, Riverside Baptist, had been their spiritual home for 20 years. I scheduled a meeting with Pastor Williams. I sat in his office and calmly laid out the evidence. He was horrified. The next Sunday, he delivered a powerful sermon on family violence and the sin of favoring one child to the detriment of another. He didn't use their names, but everyone knew who he was talking about. After the service, their fellow congregants avoided them like the plague. Within a month, they stopped attending church altogether. For Cheryl, I took the fight online. She lived for social media sympathy. So I created detailed posts on every platform she used, methodically laying out her scams with court documents and evidence. Her Instagram followers plummeted. Her Facebook friends abandoned her. Her dating profiles were bombarded with warnings. She had nowhere left to hide. Their attempts to fight back were pathetic. My father tried to sue me for defamation. His lawyer dropped the case after seeing my evidence. My mother tried to claim a mental health crisis, but a court-appointed psychiatrist found her to be perfectly sane. Cheryl's most spectacular failure was when she gave an interview to a local news station, trying to play the victim. The reporter, who had clearly done her homework, confronted her on live television. "Miss Thompson," she said, "our investigation has uncovered evidence that you've been running multiple fraudulent schemes. How do you respond to allegations that you've stolen thousands of dollars from cancer patients?" Cheryl's face went white. She stammered and ended the interview. It aired anyway. They were completely, utterly alone. Isolated by their family, their friends, their community, and their church. Their perfect world was a pile of ashes at their feet. And the trial hadn't even started yet. The 8 months leading up to the civil trial felt like a lifetime. The criminal cases had already concluded. My parents each received a sentence of 6 months in jail and 2 years of probation. It wasn't nearly enough for what they did, but it was a start. Cheryl, with her additional federal fraud charges, got a stiffer sentence, 18 months in a federal prison. But the civil trial, that was where I would get my real revenge. That was where the whole, ugly truth would be laid bare for a jury of our peers to see. When the day finally came, I walked into that courtroom with my head held high. I took the witness stand and told my story, not with hysteria or rage, but with a calm, methodical clarity that was far more damning. I presented the evidence of my injuries, the mounting medical bills, the costs of my therapy sessions. When my lawyer, Daniel, asked me how I felt when my own parents held me down while my mother beat me, I looked directly at them. My father stared back with cold hatred. My mother started to cry her crocodile tears. "I felt," I said, my voice clear and steady, "like I was being killed by strangers who happened to share my DNA." A ripple went through the courtroom. Their lawyers tried their best. Cheryl's attorney tried to paint her as a desperate single mother. Daniel countered by presenting a mountain of evidence of her gambling addiction, the forged loans, and her years of manipulation. "This isn't a desperate mother," Daniel told the jury. "This is a con artist who targeted her own family." My parents' lawyer argued that they were just trying to help both their daughters and that things got out of hand. That's when Daniel played his trump card. He played the recording my PI had uncovered, a conversation between my mother and Cheryl, recorded on Cheryl's phone weeks before the party, where they explicitly planned how to manipulate me into giving them money. "We just have to make her feel guilty," Cheryl's voice said on the recording. "Mom, you're good at that. Make her feel like she owes us something." "Don't worry, sweetheart," my mother's voice replied, chillingly sweet. "I've been making Brenda feel guilty her whole life. She'll hand over whatever we want." The courtroom was dead silent. Then Daniel did one last thing. He put a large, color photo up on the screen for the jury to see. It was a picture of my face from the hospital, swollen, bruised, with a cut on my lip. "Does this," Daniel asked, his voice ringing with indignation as he pointed to the photo, "look like parents who were trying to help? Or does this look like parents who were willing to literally beat their daughter into submission to get what they wanted?" The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman handed the verdict to the clerk. I held my breath. The clerk began to read. They found in my favor on every single count. They awarded me $1.8 million in damages from my parents, and $1.2 million from Cheryl. And then came the final blow, punitive damages. Another $500,000 from each of them. A total of $3.5 million. The money wasn't even the best part. The best part was watching their faces. The moment the numbers were read, Cheryl actually fainted, sliding right out of her chair onto the floor. My mother broke down into loud, ugly sobs. And my father, he just looked completely and utterly defeated. A hollowed-out man who had gambled everything on the wrong daughter and lost it all. If you're still listening to my story, if you've followed me on this journey, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you're here with me, that you're a part of this. Your support means the world to me, it truly does. Please, comment with the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. The aftermath of that verdict was as swift and brutal as I had hoped. The justice system, for all its flaws, can be ruthlessly efficient when it comes to collecting on a judgment. My parents were forced to sell their house, the very house where they had assaulted me, to pay their portion of the judgment. It wasn't enough, of course. They lost everything, their savings, their retirement accounts, every penny they had scraped together over a lifetime. Last I heard, Harold and Lorraine were living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town, both working retail jobs in their 60s to make the court-ordered payments to me. Cheryl had to file for bankruptcy, but it didn't do her much good. A judgment for intentional wrongdoing, like assaulting and defrauding someone, can't be discharged. She will be making payments to me, a portion of whatever meager income she can ever earn, for the rest of her life. And Keith, poor, pathetic Keith. Word spread quickly through Denver's construction industry. Frank Morrison, his old boss, made sure of that. In a business built on handshakes and trust, a reputation like his was a career death sentence. He couldn't find a decent job anywhere. The last I heard, he was working the night shift at a gas station and living in a sad little studio apartment. His betrayal had cost him the comfortable life I had provided, a life he had foolishly taken for granted. About 6 months after the trial, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered it anyway. It was my mother. "Brenda," she said, her voice shaking and thin. I need to talk to you." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "We lost everything," she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "The house, our savings, everything. Your father and I waited." "I know you'll probably never forgive us," she continued, her voice cracking. "But I need you to know, we realize now how wrong we were. What we did to you was unforgivable. I don't know what we were thinking." "Yes, you do," I said simply, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You were thinking that Cheryl mattered more than me. You were thinking that my life, my happiness, my home, and my well-being were all expendable as long as your precious daughter got what she wanted." She was quiet for a long moment on the other end of the line. Then, she finally spoke the truth. "You're right," she said softly. "That's exactly what we were thinking. And we destroyed our whole family because of it." "No," I corrected her, the finality of the words feeling like a door slamming shut forever. "You destroyed your family. I'm doing just fine." And then I hung up. And I was doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. After the divorce from Keith was finalized, I kept my house, my job, and most importantly, my self-respect. I took a portion of the lawsuit money and did something I never would have imagined. I started a non-profit foundation. It's dedicated to providing legal aid and financial counseling to women who have been financially abused by their families. I took the ugliest thing that ever happened to me and turned it into a way to help others. It's the most fulfilling work I've ever done. Of course, I went to therapy. A lot of it. I had to learn how to process the trauma, how to deal with the fact that my own family was capable of such cruelty. It was a long road, but slowly, I started to heal. I learned to trust people again. About a year after the trial, a friend set me up on a blind date. I almost canceled 3 times. But I went. His name was David. He was a retired history professor, a kind, gentle man with a quick wit and eyes that actually listened when you spoke. On our 3rd date, I told him the whole story. I laid it all out, half expecting him to run for the hills. He just sat there, listened patiently, and when I was done, he reached across the table and took my hand. He looked me straight in the eye and said, with a little smile, "Well, remind me never to get on your bad side." And in that moment, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. It felt like the sun coming out after a long, dark winter. We've been together ever since. He treats me like I'm something precious, something worth protecting. He's shown me what real love, real partnership, is supposed to feel like. I even got a promotion at work, and David was the first person I called. He was more excited than I was. Life is quiet now, in the best possible way. It's filled with weekend trips to the mountains, quiet evenings reading in the sunroom, and the simple joy of being with someone who values you for who you are. Over the years, there have been a few attempts to crawl back into my life. Cheryl tried to write me a few letters from rehab, where she was supposedly dealing with her gambling addiction. I sent them back, unopened. I have no interest in rebuilding a relationship with someone who thought my husband and my house would make nice birthday presents. Keith sent me a long, rambling letter about 6 months after the divorce was final. He claimed he'd been caught up in the moment and didn't know what he was thinking. He begged for reconciliation, swore he'd learned his lesson. I wrote a note on the back of his letter that just said, "Thanks for the laugh. Don't contact me again," and mailed it back to him. What my family did to me wasn't just cruel. It was a fundamental betrayal of everything a family is supposed to be. Trust, loyalty, respect, love. They threw all of that away because they thought I was weak, that I was the dutiful daughter who would just take it. They were wrong. I even found out later from the PI that my parents had spent my sister's portion of a small inheritance my grandmother had left for us, and had been borrowing against mine without telling me. It was just one more layer of their deceit. Losing my family was, without a doubt, the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to see who I really am when everything is stripped away. And I learned that I am much, much stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones most willing to destroy you. But the most important lesson I learned is this: when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. And when they try to take everything from you, you make damn sure they regret it for the rest of their lives.